Hey South Hills, today I just want to take a moment and celebrate what God has been doing with our church. About a year ago, we launched South Hills Manhattan Beach. And it was the beginning of a journey of what God only knew what was going to come. And so we went from 8 people to the start of this Manhattan Beach campus to 375 on their 1 year anniversary. And I want to give Brian an opportunity to share a little bit of the wins that have been happening in the last year.
It's been pretty incredible. I'm just thinking of all the families that I've talked to that have invited somebody from their family that have never been to church. Really, the key factor right now is the community that's happening outside the building. Everybody sticks around in the conversations that are happening. You'll see a table of 2 families, and they're 2 families that don't know each other. They're not friends. They didn't come together. They just sat down at a table. Another family ended up sitting there, and they have this conversation that turns into a relationship. I'm thinking of the people who've been baptized, and we've had 2 little ones that were both 8 years old. I was baptized when I was 8 years old, and when I saw these little ones that wanted to be baptized, it just reminded me of all the amazing things that God has done in my life, but that He's going to do in their lives. I mean, I can't tell you how many families have shared that their kids just never want to leave. We're finding so many that were not raised in church, and their kids are just so bought in. They're like, this is just amazing. Like, my family has a church that every one of us, from the littlest one, to me and my wife or whatever it might be, that they're all experiencing church together. And I think that's what we're called to do.
These are stories we hear at all of our campuses, but it has been unreal to see what God has been doing through South Hills Manhattan Beach. So South Hills Manhattan Beach, a huge shout out to you. All of our campuses today are celebrating you.
Well, good morning. How are you guys? Yeah. Are you guys excited for talking about work? Are you excited to give blood? I mean, there's so many great things happening today. So, no, in all seriousness, I'm excited for today. I'm excited for this series called I Need a Vocation, talking about work over the next few weeks, work, calling, passion. What do we do with our time? What does it look like to actually feel rested and experience a rejuvenation and a new sense of life? It's going to be a really helpful series, I think, regardless of where you're at. Whether you love your job or hate your job or are looking for a job or are looking to get out of your job or whatever the situation might be, it's going to be a great series. We do have the Blood Mobile out there from Cedars-Sinai. So many people already this morning since 8 a.m. have been donating. Thank you guys for doing that. And just so you know, there's actually still about 25 spaces. So if you haven't signed up, you still can. And they're giving out gift certificates to In-N-Out and Chick-fil-A and Baskin-Robbins and all kinds of good stuff over there. So I would love for you to join us in doing that. My name is Chris. I'm the campus pastor here at South Hills, Costa Mesa. Thank you for those of you watching online. I saw Michelle hosting online, and for you guys joining us this morning. I remember my least favorite job. I've had a lot of jobs. My least favorite job, hands down, no discussion about it for me, was working at Blockbuster Video. Yeah, and when I left, the company really they're not even in business anymore. So it just was all downhill from there. I hated it, man. I hated that job so much, and I love movies. But it was a thankless job. Nobody there was happy. They were always upset because we never had the movie they wanted. And if you guys remember having a Blockbuster account, there was always some fee assigned to your account, regardless of whether you did everything right or everything wrong. And it was the worst. And my first job, actually, the first job I had was I got paid $20 per stable to shovel horse manure. And that wasn't my worst job. So I just want that's how much I hated working at Blockbuster Video. So, but you guys have had jobs before. You guys understand. Maybe you're thinking of your least favorite job that you've had. Maybe it's something in the past. Maybe it's something, hopefully not, that you're in right now. But it's a possibility. Maybe you can think of jobs that you enjoyed, or maybe things that you thought that you would do, a career you thought you would be able to get into, and that just hasn't really panned out yet. And when we start to talk about work, there's a lot of different things that happen for a lot of different people. And I just want to acknowledge that from the beginning. When we talk about work, we are not just talking about clocking in at 9 a.m. and sitting in a cubicle and clocking out at 5 p.m., although that can be your work. There's people that are artists and creatives and writers. There's teachers and educators. There's people that work in the restaurant industry. There's people that work more than full-time by being a stay-at-home parent. There's people, all across the board, there's all kinds of different jobs, and work is not just the thing that you get paid for. There's all kinds of work that we do. And so we're going to talk about work over the next few weeks, and we're going to talk about it in a way that I believe will help all of us, regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, regardless of whether you absolutely love the job that you have, whether you're currently looking, whether you're looking forward to retirement, or whatever it might be for you. I'm excited for this series. Mark Twain famously was quoted as saying, "Work is a necessary evil to be avoided." And I think for a lot of us, we may not feel that all the time, but we definitely hit seasons of life, or seasons during the year, or times during the different projects or things like that. And we just have this sense of, what do I need to do to get out of as much work as possible? What do I need to do to avoid? How many vacation days do I have? How many sick days do I have? Are there any other days that I can take? When's the next federal or national holiday that everything will be shut? We kind of have this idea of how is it that we can get out of this as much as possible? How can I avoid work? And is that really all that we have to look forward to? Work. And I'm going to work as much as I need to, or as much as I can, to get to a place where I no longer need to. I just need to work as hard as I can now so that I can stop working as soon as I can, which is a lot of people's game plan. And then there's some people, weirdos, that love their jobs, that love to work. And we're going to talk about that as well. We're going to talk about what does it mean to pour everything that you have and to devote your full self into work. And when you stop to think about it, the reality is that work takes up the majority of our lives. We spend the majority of our time working and at work and pursuing these types of things. And so I want to talk about it because a lot of times, if we agree with Mark Twain, there's a sense of, man, I want to avoid it as much as possible. It feels terrible that we have to do this. It can't have been the way that we were intended to spend our lives. So what does it look like for me to figure out a different way to go about this? And so I want to go, and I want to start at the beginning because, as Julie Andrews likes to say, the beginning is a very good place to start. And so Genesis 1 is the beginning of this creation story. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the very beginning, it says, God created the heavens and the earth. And right from the beginning, you have this word created, which, we think of as like this artistic, beautiful thing, and it can be, but it's also creating something is work. It takes effort. In the beginning, In other words, God worked. And it says that he created the heavens and the earth. And so there was kind of these two different aspects. And then right after that, in verse 2 and in verse 3, it actually says that the earth was formless and void. So it's interesting because God created something that was formless and void. Like, wait a second, what does that mean? And if you actually go through and look at the original language, it's this Hebrew phrase. It's pronounced tohu wabohu, which is fun to say. And it really just kind of means like there's this chaos. So God created, and it was just this mixture of something and nothing, kind of all at the same time. And then it said that the Spirit hovers, and out of chaos, it started to form trees and plants and birds and fish and all kinds of things out of this. And it's this fascinating kind of picture. And if you really slow down and think about it, it's this, in the beginning, God worked. This is who God was. And God made something. And then out of that something, he continued to make other things. He continued to take this kind of raw, ingredients, if you will, and started to turn those things into other things and put things together in a different way. And then in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 and 28, it says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Can everybody say that last sentence with me? Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and everything, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. There's two words here I just want to really kind of zoom in on just real quickly as we move through this idea, because again, today what I really want us to kind of come to grips with is this idea of what is work and why. Why is work? I don't know if that's the appropriate way to ask that question, but what's the deal? Is this just always, what are we supposed to make of this? And so these two words I want to look at, the first one is subdue, and the second one is rule. This word subdue, it kind of connotates this idea that there are untapped and undeveloped resources that we're supposed to subdue. It's kind of this idea of wrestling down or working with. Almost like when it says that God created the heavens and the earth, and then out of it, the formless void that he had created, he began to create other things. There was material, there was ingredients that God made, and then he continued to make. He continued to create, continued to work. And we are called to fill the earth and subdue it. I don't know, have you guys ever seen somebody make pottery before? There's a pottery wheel and it spins, and they put literally dirt on the wheel, earth, clay, and they put it on there, and it's called throwing is what the term is, and you actually take something, and really what they're doing in that moment is they are subduing the earth and making it into something else. They're taking raw ingredients and forming it into something different. And I think that that's like just a very simple idea of what this is trying to articulate to us. We were created in God's image, and God has called us to take these raw ingredients of the world around us and to create something else out of them. To take the natural resources that God has made and continue to create from them. And the second word is rule. Rule over the fish and the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature. This word rule, some of your Bibles, if you're reading them, they may say have dominion over. Both of these words have to do, they kind of have this kingdom type of language. We're ruling, we have dominion over. Kingdom and dominion actually have the same root word. It's kind of like, how far does this kingdom go? How far does this rule extend? And it's interesting because if you go back a couple thousand years, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years, the ancient Near East, the rulers, the emperors, the kings of that time, when they would have their property, their kingdom, they would actually make statues of themselves and they would put them on the outskirts of their property. That way, when you stepped into it, you understood, oh, this is who the ruler is of this area that I have now entered. This is how far their kingdom reaches. And so in the beginning, God creates, and then he creates us, and he says, now I want you to rule. It's interesting because God didn't put statues of himself all around the world. He made us in his image. The same idea of creating us to represent the king and placing us all over to rule on his behalf. We're called to steward and to care for and to cultivate what the king owns, what God has created. That's who we are called to be as followers of Jesus. I think everything's okay in there. Just kidding. I know everything's okay in there. Leanne does an amazing job in our kids' ministry over there. These kids have so much fun. Work, I think it's important for us to understand. I'm going to give you guys the punchline to the sermon at the beginning of the sermon, just in case you get like a little bit antsy, in case you donated blood already and you're not sure how long you're going to make it through this message. Work was intended to be a part of who we are and what we do since the very beginning. Since before sin, since before brokenness, since before the fall. Work is not a necessary evil. Work is a necessary good. Work is necessary for us to fully embody and encompass all that God has created for us and for who we are to be. Meaningful work is important for us. And this is so crucial because I think sometimes we feel like work is this painful thing, this thing that we kind of just drudge. We don't want to have to do it. We want to get out of it as soon as we can. And if you're feeling that way, like if you have that sense of, man, I cannot believe I have to show up there again tomorrow morning, or whatever your work schedule may be. If you're feeling that way, I think that what I would want for you to hear a little bit is that might be more similar to like a warning light on the dashboard of your car, that what you expect to get out of work, you might have some things twisted. We're going to talk a little bit about what that is. Work is crucial, and it's just as important to us being a flourishing individual as rest and friendship and food and prayer. Without meaningful work, we will feel a sense of emptiness. Work was part of God's ideal for human existence. But why doesn't it feel that way? And getting ready for this series, I've been reading through some different things. I saw some statistics that probably aren't there's not a ton of surprises here. About 50% of people, 51% specifically, stated that their jobs are central to who they are. So there's this sense of, I am my job. My job is me. It's central to who I am. And then there's about 47 people who said that my job is just what I do to pay the bills. And it's kind of interesting because I would actually say that these two things are maybe on opposite ends of the spectrum. That there's one way you can swing and you can over-identify with your job or with your career, what you do for work. And then you can swing the other way and you can say, this has nothing to do with me except for earning cash that I can put gas in my car. 70% of people have articulated that they are unsatisfied in their job or in their career, that there's something that they expected it to give them that it is not able to give them. And this is true across our country. And so if this is true for 70% of the people out there, then it must be true for 70% of the people in here. And half of us are feeling like my job is who I am, and half of us are feeling I just have to go so that I can make rent this month. But isn't there more? Couldn't there possibly be more? And if God intended for us to work, and God intended for work to help fulfill the reality of who he made us to be, then why can it feel so hard? And why can it feel so frustrating and pointless at times? And that's where we come to Genesis chapter 3. So work isn't something that came after sin entered the world. Work is something that God created us to do. And in Genesis chapter 3, it says, this is after Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the tree. And God speaking, he says, to the woman, he said, I will make your pain in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. To Adam, he said, cursed is the ground because of you, through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. Essentially saying it's going to be hard work to eat from the ground. It'll produce thorns and thistles. It'll be frustrating for you. And you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. So What I'm trying to point out here is this idea that in the beginning, God worked, and then God created us in his image and gave us work to do as well. Work was always part of the plan, but because of sin, because of brokenness, because of what happened into not only into our relationships with others, into our relationship with God, brokenness entered into the reality of creation itself and sickness and all kinds of different things. Because of that, it twisted the way we experience work. If you look at the top part, when he's talking to Eve, he says, I'll make your pains in childbearing very severe. He's not saying that children are a curse, although at times it can feel that way after a long day. He's saying that the process of having kids now, there is pain that comes along with it. And in the same way, he's not saying that work is the curse. He's saying work is difficult. You have to struggle for it. There's a brokenness inherently, not only in the fact of how hard it is to work, but also because of our brokenness, we expect some things out of it that maybe it's not intended to give us. The experience of work oftentimes can include conflict and exhaustion and envy and pain and frustration. Not all of our goals will be met. The effort that we put into the ground, metaphorically speaking, it doesn't always give back one for one. You guys know that. You guys have worked on projects really, really hard before. And maybe for no other reason than you can possibly figure out, it just doesn't actually come together the way that you intended it to come together. Part of that is because of the brokenness of the world, because of the effect of sin. Work does not always go the way that we intend for it to go. Even when we're successful, it can often feel fruitless and frustrating. And everybody says, amen. And it's interesting, and we don't need to go into it because it's not totally related, but if you look at people who have everything, all of the money, all of the success, the fame, you can Google it and you will find quotes from all kinds of celebrities who say, sure, money is great, but it actually hasn't given me everything that I long for. The success or the power or the position, yes, it's fantastic, but it hasn't actually fulfilled all of the desires that I have. So even at the most successful end of the spectrum, there's still this aspect that it's not giving us what we long for. And I think that the danger for a lot of us is that we look for identity and significance in the things that we do. But when we define who we are by what we do, we end up on very dangerous ground. When we define who I am as a person by the things that I do with my time or my energy, when who I am fully circles around the fact that I am a pastor of a church in Costa Mesa, all of a sudden we end up in really dangerous territory. Because the reality is that tomorrow I may no longer be the pastor of a church in Costa Mesa. That took a lot more of a bleak turn than I'm not announcing a resignation or anything. You just never know what tomorrow holds. And so if my identity is, and my meaning and my significance is tied into this job, this title, this thing that I do, that could be taken away at any moment. And then who am I? I'm nothing. There's nothing left of me. I put all of my eggs into this basket and it's not able to do it. We oftentimes fall into this trap of defining who we are by what we do. Work can almost become a god in and of itself. Oftentimes we see people take this turn, become workaholics. And some of you guys are like, yeah, I think I'm a little bit of a workaholic. And some of you guys are like, why would anybody ever choose to be a workaholic? There's so many other better aholics you could be than a workaholic. There's this thing that because of kind of the brokenness of our heart, we look for affirmation and validation. And one of the easiest places, the easiest ways we can think of to find it is in our work, because we can prove that we're worthy. We can prove that we can be good enough or smart enough or capable or whatever those things are, because we can earn a check or we can earn a promotion or we can reach that goal or we can reach that sale or we can have People sing our praises and tell us how great we are, even though they all work for us and we pay their paychecks. And so obviously they think that we're great to our face. It's this broken thing that we start to turn, and it's this insatiable hunger for validation that can begin to be found in our work, because it's so much easier sometimes than finding that in the healthier places. There's a really broken way of dealing with this. And this is kind of how workaholism can become a god in and of itself, because we go to this place to find our meaning and our significance. Some of you guys are more like vacationaholics. You expect leisure and rest and fun to fill you in all of these same ways that other people expect work to be able to do it. And both ends of this are actually going to be just bottomless pits that we'll never actually find what we're looking for in those places. We'll talk about that a little bit more throughout this series. But our hearts, because we have this brokenness and our disordered hearts, we crave affirmation and validation. If I can just close this deal, or if I can make this sale, or if I can get this promotion, if I can make it as this type of artist, or get recognition as this type of person, or if I can help my kid be at this level before they go into kindergarten, or at this level before they graduate high school, or whatever it is, all of a sudden we think that these are the things that are actually going to give us the validation that we long for. And even if your job is a good thing, it can be used in unhealthy ways. As a pastor, I think that generally speaking, my job is a fairly good thing. I try and help people and connect them to a God that loves them and wants to give them grace and forgiveness and restore their hearts and their relationship. I mean, it's a lot of good things. But there's been times in my life where I have kind of just steered full force into work. And even that can become healthy. Even the good things, when we start to expect the wrong things out of them, or we do them for the wrong reasons. What does all this mean, Chris? What are we talking about? How is this supposed to be good news? I came in sad about work, and I'm still sad about work. How do we help adjust this? I get it. We're not the only ones that feel this frustration and this tension. And I want to look at a passage. There's a book in the Old Testament called Ecclesiastes. And we don't know specifically who wrote it, but there's a lot of assumptions. And in the book itself, the writer refers to himself as the teacher. It's kind of the way that he's referring to himself. And this writer goes on and he articulates how he has looked for the meaning of life in passion. And he's looked for the meaning of life in stuff or material objects. And he's looked for the meaning of life in all of these different places. And he goes on. And I just want to read, I think this will be a very encouraging passage for you guys. It's Ecclesiastes chapter 2, starting in verse 17. He says, "So I hated life." Nailed it. "Because the work that is done under the sun is grievous to me. All of it is meaningless." Another one, you can get that tattooed just somewhere, wherever you're going to tattoo your next Bible verse on your... "All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all of the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me." What he's saying is he's worked, he's earned some things, he's maybe had some success, and the reality that he's processing is, I'm going to die, and this stuff is just going to go to someone else, somewhere else. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish, yet they'll have control over all of the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all of my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. We're getting real strong bitter vibes out of this guy, right? This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all of the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days, their work is grief and pain. Even at night, their minds do not rest. And everyone together said, "This too is meaningless." Guys, I'm so happy you could be here today, and I could just fill you with hope and encouragement. It's important that we recognize that it's not that work is hard because it's 2022 and everything is hard. Everything is upside down and broken, and we're all upset about everything and everyone. That's not why work is hard. Work is hard because it's been hard. Work has felt meaningless because it's always felt meaningless. He continues to use this refrain. It's almost like a chorus that he continues to sing. He says, under the sun, under the sun, and it's not because he did manual labor. He's talking about this idea of the work that he's doing in this lifetime, in this physical kingdom, on this earth, for this purpose. That's what's meaningless. When I'm doing all of this work expecting that my success is going to be able to do something for me, all of a sudden I'm realizing, wait a second, I'm going to die. And somebody else is going to get this. What's the point of this? When he's finding all of this wealth and he's earning and the savings and the stuff that he's been able to get, all of a sudden he's realizing, wait a second, this is all just going to go to someone else at some point. Under the sun, in this lifetime, in this physical reality, if I'm just trying to work for success for myself, it is meaningless. And I think that sometimes, while you may not have earned quite as much as this teacher, maybe you haven't had as much success, and maybe you're like, well, I'd like to try and see if it could fulfill me in some way. Like maybe a couple $1 million would help fulfill me in a little bit, you know? There's this sense that we all kind of have this desire of maybe if I get to this place, or if I get this promotion, or if I get this job, or if I get this type of career, or if I'm able to stay home, or if I can retire at this age, or whatever the things are, we have this sense that somehow that will actually make us feel safe, secure, that we've made it, that we're successful, that we are significant in some way. And what this writer is saying is that all of it under the sun is meaningless. There's got to be a deeper connection. There's something else besides just doing the work to earn the money. And that's what we have to turn to. That's what we have to turn our focus to. A job cannot give you what only God can give you. You cannot find identity and significance in a job because it can only really be found in our Creator. We were made in God's image. So the way we experience wholeness and fulfillment isn't through a job, it's through a connection with who God is. And we don't work because of brokenness. We work because we are made in God's image. I have 2 kids. I tell stories about them all the time because they're hilarious and frustrating and all the things in between. 7 and 10. Our 7-year-old loves to do schoolwork, which we were very surprised by because he's crazy. He never sits still, or never sat still, and we were just like, okay, he's not gonna do great at school. Not because we didn't, whatever. Anyway, but surprise, turn of events, he loves school. And he loves homework. And his teacher, he's in kindergarten, and they don't really give homework. But every day, he asks if he has homework, and my wife is able to find some work for him to do. And he's just like wired in this way that enjoys doing the work, the task, whatever it might be. It's starting it and going through it and completing it. And he just loves every aspect of that. And then I have another child who doesn't love work. And he's just not wired in a way that he's driven to do those types of things. And so for him, it's helping him understand and teaching the process. But we're all wired in different ways. And what we have to recognize is that in our DNA, we were created in the image of God on some level to find wholeness through work. And with my 7-year-old, he runs towards it. And with my older son, there is this process of realizing that when you do the work, you actually experience a sense of wholeness and fulfillment. The perfect example is about 2 weeks ago, it was a Sunday night, and he said, I've got this project due tomorrow morning, so we got to go to the craft store, and I have to make a mask that represents who I am or something. And so we just said, yeah, we're not going to do that tonight, dude. I don't know if that's a good parenting decision or not. But somehow the next day at school, he was able to make a mask. I think he spent about 12 minutes doing it. And we didn't see it until open house about a week later. And so we go in and he's like, do you know which mask is mine? And we're looking at a wall of 24 different masks. And I genuinely could not tell which one was his. And then finally, he was so proud to show us the mask that he made. Like, this is it. Like, that's awesome, buddy. I love it. And then school's ending, it's our last week, and so the teachers are sending all this stuff home, and he brought his mask home along with this other pile of crafts and things he's done. And we don't keep everything in our house. We don't keep every school project, and so we were kind of just sorting through stuff of what we were going to hold on to, what was going to make it on the fridge, what wasn't. Again, parenting decisions. I'm not sure if I'm doing this right or not, but anyways, he realized that his mask was going to make it into the we're not going to keep this pile. And he's like, I can't believe you don't value the hard work I put into this mask. I was like, this is the one that you forgot about until the day of, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, okay, buddy, well, I don't know about hard work. Like, you're going to be just fine. But there was this thing for him where the effort that he put into this, all of a sudden he started to connect it with this thing internally, like he had created this thing, and he all of a sudden cared about it in a different way. We're all across the spectrum. Some of us naturally, it's like easy to go to work. Some of you guys have work on your phone right now or your watch. You're getting emails or updates, your checklists, your Asana, your whatever it is. Some of you, it's a difficult thing to turn your attention there, but for every one of us, there's something wired into the way we were created that work doesn't make us whole, but we were wired in a way where we experience wholeness as we work. God intended for us to work. That's probably that pain, that frustration is probably why Mark Twain thought of it as a necessary evil. And I think for a lot of us, we think about Adam and Eve and them screwing it all up for us. Like we could be drinking Mai Tais and sunbathing in the Garden of Eden if they hadn't done this. Like sign me up for their work. Like where's the application for their job as it was? But there's this tension around it for us. So it's important, the very core foundation it's important for us to hold on to today is that work is not the curse. Work is something that God created us to do. He actually commissioned us to work, to continue on with his work. He made things, and then he told us, now I want you to take these things that I've made, and I want you to subdue it. I want you to cultivate it. I want you to turn it into other things. I want you to create. Working under the sun is meaningless because it doesn't last, but when we work because of the way it reflects our Creator, it changes the entire purpose. So what are we supposed to do? Because we all think about work in different ways. Some of you guys love gardening, and I think that it's terrible. There's very few things I want to do less than gardening. Some of you guys love Excel sheets. You guys are like little formula wizards in those little boxes. I get stressed out even when an Excel sheet is opening up on my computer. I can just feel the anxiety beginning to... I love cooking, and for some of you guys, you hate cooking. My wife, it gives her stress and anxiety. She does not like cooking at all. We all have different things that we enjoy. Some people, they want to stay home with their kids full time, and that is a fulfilling thing for them. And other parents, they're like, man, I love my kids, and I also want to still work, and that's a fulfilling thing for them. None of these things are right or wrong, but work shows up differently for all of us. We would all consider work in different ways, and so one of the things that I want to try and do for us is to get to the bottom of how do we view what work is? How can we define work? And I'm going to wrap up here in just a minute. There's a theologian named Miroslav Volf, which is a difficult name to say, but he defines work as an activity that serves to satisfy the needs of the individual or others. Now, let me just say, this definition is not meant to blow your mind. This is a very basic definition. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. That feels about right. It's an activity that serves to satisfy the needs of others, of an individual. This is what work is. It's an outward-facing thing. It's something that we do to satisfy these other needs, to meet needs, to care for others. It's an outward-facing thing. Work is not the goal in and of itself. It's something that we do. Sometimes it's enjoyable. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's paid. Sometimes it's voluntary. But work is not the end in itself. It's meant to satisfy the needs of an individual or others. There's this calling that we have in work. We work to experience fulfillment, but it can't provide fulfillment on its own. And the question isn't as much about what you do for work as what you expect work to do for you. What do you expect work to give you? What do you expect work to define about who you are, about how successful you are, or whether you have value, or whether you matter? How you stack yourselves up. Obviously, our culture has a different perspective on the different types of jobs and what jobs matter and what jobs don't matter, what jobs are worthy of being praised and which ones aren't worthy of being praised. There's this old Chris Rock bit. This is pre-slap. This is like 10 years ago. He was talking about how his first job was at McDonald's. He's like, I made minimum wage, which is basically my boss's way of saying, I'd pay you less if I could, but it's illegal. But it's like there's like a very broken perspective on what work matters, what work is good. But at the very core of it, what we see is God worked. God created. There is this manual labor aspect of who God is. And if you look at the life of Jesus, who lived to be about 33 years old, Jesus, the Savior, the Messiah, the Son of God, spent the first 30 years of his life working as a carpenter. And only 3 years in the ministry that we're familiar with. Work is a good thing. There is dignity in all forms of work. So the question isn't about what you do for work as much as it is what is it that you expect work to do for you, because nothing could be more dangerous than expecting your work to give you something that only God can give you. And over the next couple weeks, we're going to talk about what if I'm stuck in a job that I hate, or what if my work is slowly killing me, my schedule, I never have time to recover. What if I don't think my work benefits others or supports goodness in the world? We're going to talk about some of these things. But for today, it's so important for us to recognize that God worked and we were made in God's image and called to work. Work is not a curse. It can be difficult. It can be beautiful. But when we work, it is a good thing. I want to look at one last verse in Genesis chapter 2. It says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it, which is where Missy Elliott got the idea for her hit song. Just kidding. Nobody, it's okay. This idea of work and take care, again, there's so much meaning here. The Bible, the Old Testament specifically, was written in Hebrew, and then it was translated into other languages. So we have the English word for work, but the Hebrew word for work that was originally written in is the word abad, which is like hilarious, right? Like literally, work is a bad thing. So yeah, it doesn't really help my sermon point here. But this word for work, in the original language, the Old Testament, over and over again, every time it used the word work, we read it in the English language, it's this word abad, over and over again. But that's not the only time that word abad was used. It was used a ton of other times, specifically to define two words, and these are the other words that it was translated into. Work, service, and worship. When you read through the Old Testament scriptures, and you see this word work, oftentimes that same exact word was used to refer to worship. It was used to refer to how we serve others, care for others. And I don't think it's an accident, because there's actually a lot of words in the Hebrew language. It's an intentional choice, because these three things are linked together. Work, service, and worship. When we work, sometimes it feels like work. Sometimes it's hard, and it doesn't always feel rewarding, and it can be frustrating or fruitless, and sometimes it's work. This is what I'm doing. This is my work. This is what I do. But work is also a way that we serve. God has called us. He has created us to bear his image and to serve, care for others, to fight for the good of the world around us, to live and work in a way that actually creates flourishing for other people, that brings hope and spreads goodness. And we'll talk about all the ways that can begin to play out. Next week, we're going to look at that a lot more. So work is service, and work is worship. When we work, when we do what God has created us to do, God's honored by that. It's a good thing. It's a way that we acknowledge and we say, God, this is who you made me to be. And so this is what I'm doing. This is me putting on my In-N-Out uniform, which was another one of my favorite jobs that I had for a long time. This is me putting on my pastor uniform. This is me putting on my stay-at-home parent uniform. This is me putting this on. And all of it is to reflect who you are, a God who works. So work can be hard. There's no way to get around that. But work in and of itself is not a curse. It's not going to fix us. It's not going to solve us. It's not going to be able to give you fulfillment or meaning that only God is able to give you. And work is a good thing. And so there's not really a quick, easy, like here's 3 things to do tomorrow to make your job better. This isn't that kind of message. But tomorrow, when you clock in at the office, or tonight when you go to your graveyard shift, or maybe your work starts as soon as you check your kids out of South Hills Kids, and all of a sudden you're back on the clock with your family. As you enter into these things, I want you to embrace this reality that you are fulfilling the purpose that God designed you to do, to work. And it's a good thing. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's serving. Sometimes it's worshiping. And this is a different perspective that we get to approach this with each day and each moment. Let's pray together.